one is Charlene Avery. Charlene, if you could please state your name and your address.
The microphone is the room.
My name is Charlene Avery and I live in Sugar Land. I hope we will remember that we are here to ensure that our shelter animals are treated humanely and compassionately while keeping public safety in mind. At the end of September, the shelter had 164 cats, which rose to 194 by early October, and was an increase that raises questions about residency and public capacity is 69. Although the shelter reported the cat population had dropped to 85 at the end of December, very few were available for adoption and few were in isolation or labeled as feral. We are still unsure if the 60+ cats were euthanized or the number is just incorrect. A further area of concern involves recent euthanization decisions for certain dogs. In Daisy's case, bite incident documentation shows she was scheduled for euthanasia rather than quarantine, contrary to what was communicated to the public. The fact that Daisy survived is entirely due to the vet choosing to take possession of her. She now is thriving. Silas's situation is even more troubling. Silas was adopted by a family, but after allegedly biting a minor, he was returned to the shelter. The only available report is barely legible, and there is a complete absence of supporting documents such as a detailed bite incident report. This lack of documentation directly conflicts with the shelter's established EU policy. Notably, Silas displayed no aggression while in the shelter or during previous foster experiences. Despite this, he was euthanized immediately upon his return. There are 2 other dogs that were euthanized in December alone, and I have requested all documentation on them as well. The lack of transparency makes it difficult for staff, volunteers, and the community to understand or trust the shelter's intentions for our shelter animals. Recommendations include improved transparency. The shelter should regularly publish thorough updates on animal counts and clearly identify the status of all animals that require special attention. Clear communication. Intake policies must be updated online and to the public in a more timely manner. Adherence to policy. All euthanization practices must follow established procedures with complete and accessible documentation in every case. Every effort should always be made to save the life of every animal within our shelter, unless it is medically necessary or animal is in fact a true danger to the public. Record review and audit of intake, outcome, and incident records may help correct discrepancies and restore confidence in reporting and decision-making. Questions about animal reporting, the visibility and fate of cats, and the shelter's approach to euthanization, especially in recent troubling cases, highlight the pressing need for greater accountability. Addressing these issues is vital for maintaining public trust and ensuring humane outcomes for all animals in the shelter's care. Thank you.
Okay, our second speaker is Pansy Chung.
Good afternoon. My name is Pansy Chung and I'm a long-term Sugar Land resident. And thank you guys for your service, first of all. I'm speaking today not out of anger, but of genuine concern and hope. First, I want to ask you to support citizens to be able to speak up without fear. Some residents have felt silenced, labeled as difficult, and just asking questions. For many of us, social media has become the only way left to share concerns, especially when direct communications hasn't worked in the past. Some topics are uncomfortable, some topics are hard to hear at first, but raising factual concerns when it makes us uneasy is not an attempt to disrupt, it's civic engagement. Yes, there are trolls out there, but many voices here are thoughtful, informed, and deeply invested in this community. So I'm asking you please to meet these voices with empathy and to see them as engagement, not oppositions. And then there are some issues at the shelter that may need to be clarified. There are policies, including euthanasia policy, that hasn't always appeared to be followed. Cases like the dogs Daisy and Salas leave questions unanswered. On top of that, shelter numbers under current management are also looking drastically different from before. I respectfully ask this board to take a careful look at shelter statistics and to really investigate the input and output of these numbers and for each animals to be accounted for. Over 60 cats being accounted for in 2 weeks is concerning. But again, I'm not here to point fingers. I'm just talking facts. I'm asking for transparency, review, and corrections where if it's needed. Also, I want to say this again sincerely. When AAB board members ask tough questions, please know that your citizens will stand with you. We will have your back because those questions matter. And so I have 2 requests to make. I would like the city to consider these 2 things. First, for animal advisory board members to be able to put agenda items of your own choosing to your own meeting agendas. This will help independence will help strengthen your work. And then secondly, I would like for AAB meeting presentations to be posted on city websites at least 3 days, maybe 3 business days prior to in advance. So residents and board members have time to prepare, research, and have productive discussions, especially when board members may have to make urgent life versus death decisions at these meetings. So thank you for listening, and thank you once again, and AAB members and city staffs for your service and dedication.
Okay, we will now go on to item number 4, minutes, since I did call to order before public speakers. So have you had time to review the minutes, and is there a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Minutes approved. Now we are going to move on to our annual ethics training.
Good afternoon. I see a lot of here and a few new ones. So those of you who don't know me, my name is Meredith Reedy. I am the city attorney and your game master for today. So today we are going to have our annual ethics training, the purpose of which is to receive an overview of the code of ethics, the training as required by the code, and hopefully serve your term without having to have a nice little visit to the Independent Ethics Review Board. So here we go. So who gets to play this game? I'm going to go ahead and talk about the whole code because I don't know what your aspirations might be. You may want to run for city council. You may say, hey, animals are great, but next I want to try zoning. I don't know, so I'm going to tell you all the rules. So we always invite the members of city council to participate. Every once in a while, we invite former council members and former board members and candidates for council. And congratulations, as an advisory board member, you also get to play. We have 8 major rules of this game. We're going to go through all of them, and then we'll play the game at the end. So we'll start with disclosure of conflicts of interest. And you're going to say, well, what is a conflict of interest? A conflict of interest could be in business entity or real property. So business entity is the rule of 10%. If you own 10% or more of the fair market value, or 15,000 more of the fair market value of that business, congratulations, you have a conflict of interest. Or if you have 10% of your gross income from the previous year, you also have a conflict. Real property, if you happen to own a whopping value of 2,500 in the value of that real property, you now have a conflict of interest. And you're saying, okay, I have a conflict. What am I supposed to do? You get to file a conflict disclosure statement with our city clerk's office no later than 5 p.m. on the Friday after you find out you discover you have a conflict, which is most likely because you've seen the agenda and you went, uh-oh. And then we're going to ask that you abstain. We have technology these days. People can send text messages and everything else. We can be watched online depending on what meeting you're on. We want to make sure that the residents know that you are not participating in that conversation and you're not telling your fellow board members how they should vote or whatever that might impact your conflict. And so we ask you to abstain. That's also state law, and then leave the room. So you also get to tell us if you're related to a vendor. So when I go through this, please keep in mind that the conflict of interest and its relationship applies to you, your spouse, your children, or your parents. And so if you, any of those people I just mentioned, receive taxable income from a vendor of $2,500 or more in the past year, or if you're related by the 3rd degree of consanguinity or 2nd degree by affinity, you get to fill out a form and tell us who you're related to. If you don't know who is related to you within those degrees, let me know. I have a beautiful chart on my desk. I'm more than happy to share it with you. So gifts. This is the holiday season. This is more appropriate at Thanksgiving time when people are giving away free turkeys, but you get to brag to us when you receive a gift. Not only is this by our code, it's also state law. Now, we call them gifts. The district attorney calls them bribes. So you get to decide how you want to classify it. I prefer the softer term of gifts. So you have to talk to us about lodging, transportation, entertainment, or food. It is a $100 cumulative value from that individual vendor on a rolling 12-month period. You'll notice that food has this nice little asterisk. If you have the privilege of spending time with a vendor close enough to be able to have a conversation with them, order that appetizer, get a doggy box, get a to-go box, get an extra dessert, because you now can spend up to $500 for the privilege of spending quality time with that vendor. Additional rules, doing business with the city. This applies to city council members. City council members cannot enter into any substantial contract with the city. And you're going, oh my goodness, what is a substantial contract? It is a whopping $1,000. Now it is for the entire term that they serve. So if they're a one-term council member, divide it by 3, subtract the $1. If they're lifers and they want to be here for 9 years, you can do the math. Representations and appearances. This is where I like to tell you which hat you're wearing. So if you are posting on Nextdoor, if you're walking in front of another board, if people still write letters to the editors, we ask you to identify which capacity you're speaking in. So you can say, as a member of the Animal Advisory Board, my position is this. Or you can say, as a resident of the city of Sugarland, my position is this. This is important because you are not authorized to speak on behalf of the city without our prior permission or without a statement of how we want you to do it. We want you to make it very clear to the residents if it's your personal opinion or if you're carrying a city's position forward. Appearances. So you cannot come in front of your own board, so this doesn't apply to you, but if you're on another board, future aspirations or term limited, you cannot go into that board for 2 years after your term has expired and get paid to represent somebody in front of that board. Because there is a conflict of interest, there's a perception that you might know these people and they're going to vote because you're friends, because you suffered through all these quality board meetings together. Misuse and disclosure of official information. This is if you get confidential information, it typically pertains to either an economic development negotiation or in your case, if there's a lawsuit. So if for some reason that there's a lawsuit that you all might have to provide information on, you get the privilege of coming back to the council dining room with me and we get to have a little talk, door shut, give you some legal advice, that sort of thing. That is confidential information under our code and state law. You cannot disclose that to anybody. Participating in procurement. Someday, if you want to spend Tuesday evenings with us here at City Hall and join City Council, you are not allowed to participate in procurement. State law is very clear on how we procure information, procure products, and we must follow that to the T. Staff is very, very strict because there are criminal penalties should we not follow that. So anytime we have procurement going through, we do not allow council to participate until it's the end where it's finalizing a contract. It's either a yes or no vote. If we find out a council member has provided information to the vendor or the vendor has contacted a council member prior to that vote, we then disqualify that vendor because we do not want there to be any appearance that somebody got an inside deal. And then campaign contributions. Once again, if you decide you want to run for council, spend Tuesday evenings with us, you are not allowed to accept any campaign contribution from somebody who is suing the city for $25,000 or more. We do not want you to believe, or we don't want the residents to believe there's an opportunity to buy a settlement or to get information related to a lawsuit. So if you put your campaign contribution in and we happen to notice it, as we have an open records request, we'll call you up and say, well, you need to return this money because we don't want our residents to have any thoughts that you are buying a lawsuit or a settlement. I went through that very quickly, and I know you love the ordinance as much as I do. Or if you can't sleep this evening, go ahead and find a full copy of the entire 17 pages at Chapter 2, Article 4 of the city's Code of Ordinances. If you happen to have questions, guess what? You can call me. Well, can't call me because the phones don't work, but you can send me an email. And I am more than happy to answer your question. I will even write you an answer out as an email. It's called a get out of jail free card. So if someone does file a complaint and you get pulled in front of the Independent Ethics Review Board, you can say, guess what? I talked to the city attorney ahead of time. These are the facts. I did exactly what she said. You're off the hook. You're probably going to get a hand slapped. I'm the one that's now in trouble. So please be very clear to me with your facts so that I can give you a really good get out of jail free card. So if someone doesn't follow the rules, then anybody on a board or any resident can file a complaint. Now it must be signed in writing. It must be signed, must state the person who they believe the accused, the person who supposedly violated the code, the section of the code that is violated, and sworn. Once we get that, it's filed with the city clerk's office. So you have 1 year from the date of the alleged violation or 1 year from the time you found the violation. And then it gets submitted to me for review. And what do? I go, yep, signed and sworn. Yep, this person is subject to the code. This behavior is also governed by the code, and it's been 1 year. After that happens, I give it to the Independent Ethics Review Board. I hired them their own attorney because I'm conflicted, because I represent you all. And they go through it and look at it and determine whether or not a complaint has occurred, if a violation has occurred. It's a two-step process. The first step is they go, wow, if all these facts are true, this could be a violation. They have a second step, which they do an investigation and then hold a hearing. And if they determine after that second hearing that somebody did in fact violate the rules, they can impose sanctions. Top is letter of notification. At the very bottom is recommended recall. So you'll notice that the Independent Ethics Review Board does not have the authority to remove somebody, but they can recommend to City Council that they are remove the appointed officials. And once you're voted in, you're voted out. So all they can do is write a letter to the editor saying they're wearing their Independent Ethics Review Board hat, and the recommendation is that a recall petition occur. That was fast. Do you have any questions before you play? You all saw this last year, so you already know the answers. Few of you haven't. So this is participatory if you want credit. Otherwise, you can come back and watch me do it again next week at the Music Advisory Board meeting. So here we go. So to increase revenue and promote tourism within the city, a council member suggests the city install a kayak-friendly boat ramp over at Brazos River and then over at Oyster Creek near Constellation Field. Does it matter that this council member's daughter happens to own a rent-by-the-hour inflatable kayak company?
Yes, it matters.
Yes, it is a conflict of interest. Okay, but this council member is a supportive parent, and the council member then makes a few phone calls, gets the item in front of the Parks Board member, or excuse me, the Parks Board, and they are excited. Now that the council member has made these phone calls, is there a problem for this council member? Yes, it's a conflict of interest, and they are using their position as a council member to get special privileges that an average citizen in the city does not have. So now the Parks Board says, you know what? We love kayaks. We want to activate the water. This is great. So they enthusiastically endorse the prospect of the boat ramps. And then somebody goes, you know what? I think food trucks would be perfect. Yes, we should feed people before we put them on the river in an inflatable kayak. So now we're in front of P&Z, and planning and zoning is going, you know what? This is great. And we have a commissioner who's sitting up there and goes, sweetheart, put that offer in on that food truck. We are going to just be great. Let's buy that food truck. Do we have a problem with a P&Z commissioner sending that message to their spouse?
Yes.
What is your concern? Sorry?
Sensitive information that could influence
It
decisions.
was a trick question because the information was provided in a public meeting at the Parks Board and then provided again in a public meeting at P&Z. So it was not in the back room. It's a trick question. So far, nobody has gotten it right. Yes. Not there. I snuck something by everybody. So that is not a conflict, but that was a trick question. So no violations there as long as the information is exchanged in a public meeting. If I can go back and watch it online or read it in the minutes, it happened, you can talk about it. So clearly we think it's great. So everybody's on board. We're now in front of the 4A and 4B, the city's economic development, asking for some incentives. And they say, you know what, we want the best possible kayak company here in the city. We're going to give them some money because we want them to be here. And congratulations to that council member. It's his own sweet daughter. And so now they get all that. We're ignoring all limitations. And we have now given her all the money she needs to relocate this company to Sugar Land. As opposed to that council member, do we have any violations? If they voted in their capacity on 4A and 4B. Yes, it's still a conflict of interest. What they should have done is file the conflicts form, stepped out and abstained. So now we have financing secured, zoning is in place. City council now votes an exclusive license to this company. Do we still have a conflict of interest if this council member voted? Yes, there's a theme here. Okay, so 6 months go by. It is fantastic. They are making money greater than we can expect. That food truck guy, P&Z, just thrilled to death. He's made $45,000. Unfortunately, Labor Day weekend came. Kayaker was bitten by an alligator. Who saw that coming, right? Oyster Creek, we don't have alligators. So now the injured kayaker has sued the kayak company and the city because the kayak company doesn't have much money. They've only made $30,000, doesn't cover medical bills. And so now city council gets to have a little chat with me in the dining room. Do we have any concerns with this? With that council member attending the executive? That goes back to my trick question. It's not a trick question this time because now that council member has access to confidential information.
I have a question.
Yes.
So when the food truck was put into business, put into play and makes money, doesn't that become a violation then? Like
Planning and zoning commissioner?
whoever made whoever texted his wife and said, hey, buy a food truck.
Why do you think that would be a violation?
Not the idea of saying, because it was a public meeting, but that they actually put the food truck into, I'm assuming that's the same food truck and they're making money now. But that,
Same food truck, they are making money, but it is not equal. Because the prohibition on doing business with the city is actually with council members. And this is not, when you do business in the city, he's actually getting to keep all the hot dog money he is making.
okay.
And I'm hoping that he passed food inspection, but because that wasn't covered, we're gonna let that one slide. Good question. So the city council has now settled the lawsuit. They revoked the license and they said, you know what, anybody and everybody can go stick their thing in there. You can run the risk, let your kayak get eaten by an alligator. So we now have a local resident and a business owner who's mad because he said, you know what, my kayaks would not have been inflatable. There would not have been an alligator bite. I'm gonna file with the Independent Ethics Review Board. We have reached the day of reckoning. The Independent Ethics Review Board has received the complaint. And what violations, if any, will they sustain? Well, we had one major theme throughout. It's conflict of interest. So if the council member as the council member participated by making the call to the Parks Board, and if they had voted on all those items, the board tells me that they would have recommended recall because they believe that that was such a substantial violation of state law and the code that that council member does not have the ability to continue to represent the citizens fairly. They tell me that if the council member had realized their error after they had called the Parks Board and just filed the conflicts of interest form and stopped voting along the way, that it probably would have been maybe $1,000 fine and a slap on the wrist. So do you have any additional questions? All right, I'll see you in a year.
Thank you for always keeping it interesting.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, we will go, at this time, we'll move on to item 4, the administrator's report.
Good afternoon. Thank y'all for coming in. We have a lot to get through today. After this, we're hoping to workshop our strategic plan with y'all. So I'm going to try to go through this quickly. Let me know if you have questions. Okay. So first, I would like to briefly introduce to you 2 new staff members. Our new field supervisor is Leslie Linares. Leslie brings 9 years of experience in animal services and oversees our field operations, supporting officers in the field. One thing that stands out about her background, she originally considered veterinary medicine but found her calling working at animal services, doing hands-on shelter work. That experience allows her to balance both enforcement as well as animal welfare. She's committed to professional growth, both for herself and her team. And she also continues to carry her certified vet assistant certification. And we're glad to have her on board. Leslie, would you stand up for us? Our next new staff member is Bo. Boudreaux, sorry, not good at that. So Bo brings with him 5 years of experience as a professional dog trainer, with a strong focus on the relationship between animals and their caregivers. His background is especially valuable in our shelter environment, where we need that consistency, structure, and enrichment. So Bo oversees our kennel staff, as well as daily animal care, our enrichment program, and he's taking on managing our volunteer program, which is critical extension of how we can provide the best care to the animals. What stands out about Bo, he is both people-centered as well as animal-centered, and he supports strong relationships between pets, staff, as well as volunteers. Bo, would you stand up for us? Woo! The animal care coordinator position is a new position. Previously, we had 2 engagement coordinators. However, we needed more focus on our animal care, and this gives him, he's back there working alongside his staff and making sure that our enrichment are happening every day. All right, staffing levels. So I want to brief. This slide, it provides a snapshot of our current staffing. On the left-hand side are the positions that we have recently filled. These, many of these roles form core parts of our leadership. On the right-hand side, you see our vacancies. We have a kennel tech, full-time and part-time, and an intake and adoption specialist, and an animal service officer. What's important to understand is that these vacancies do not affect commitment. The work is still getting done while we have the positions open and we're interviewing. It just it strains the staff, and it makes it harder to expand our programs. But with our recent hires, they've been really intentional, and we're really seeing our operations stabilize. So we are thankful for them. I also want to briefly highlight several employees who were recently nominated for citywide recognition. So nomination is important because they're peer and leadership driven. It reflects how staff are showing up each day and setting high standards at Animal Services. So for Trailblazer of the Year, Paige Pruden and Myrna Wetz was nominated because of their initiative, adaptability, and willingness to step up anytime we have challenges. For the Life Saving Award, Patricia Flores and Samuel Kraft were nominated. They always show sound judgment and a clear commitment to animal welfare, even in bad situations. So these recognitions, they're not isolated. They're indicators of a cultural shift that we're having at Animal Services. And I'm really proud of where the team's heading. All right. The next is addressing standardizing of uniforms. It's really a deliberate decision. First, they need temperature appropriate gear. Previously, they were in all black, which was terrible during the summer. So having the standardized breathable uniforms for safety, it also clearly differentiates us from law enforcement because our officers were getting mistaken for law enforcement. We also have new badges over here. We did check with police and fire to ensure that they were comfortable with the design and that they didn't conflict with their public safety badges. So we're also looking for public recognition. So when somebody sees the officers out in the field, they know that's our animal control officers. The officers are also starting to take part in our public events. They're going to be the ones running most of the public events. We really want the community to get to know them and understand we're not just enforcement. Right, so our programs. This slide, it outlines core programs that support our operations. So we have our volunteer and foster programs, which expand our capacity because they're always there with hands-on. We have the pet pantry, which was started in fiscal year 2025 to help residents keep their pets during financial strain. Our trap, neuter, vaccinate, release program, it addresses community cats. And we'll go a little bit more detail into that later in the presentation. We have our pet finder and our finder to foster to help reunite lost pets with their owners. Sniplets, this is a new program for last year. It helps get young animals before they are, well, as soon as they're weaned, but before they're spayed or neutered, into homes for that critical period of socialization, as well as taking them away from being exposed to disease. And then we have our vet techs follow up with them because they are required to get that surgery done. Finally, we are expanding our vaccine and microchip events to promote public health, as well as hopefully the animals coming in, we are able to reunite them with their families if they have microchips. Yes, ma'am.
Do our grants for this program and the pet pantry allow owners outside of our city?
It depends on the program. So for our pet pantry, that is just for in Sugar Land limits. Our microchip and vaccine events, I believe they're open to everybody.
Okay. Very good.
So, we expanded on a lot of the programs this past year. Our intention was to reduce intake by keeping pets in their homes, shorten our length of stay, and improving live outcomes. We had 3 new initiatives in the last quarter. So this slide highlights several initiatives. First, volunteer expectation and opportunities. As our program grows, we want to ensure that there are clear roles, consistent standards, and that it aligns the volunteers with the staff. What previously an engagement coordinator would oversee the volunteers, but they also had a lot of things that kept them out of the shelter. So we moved that position with Bo because he's hands-on with the animals. He knows what the animals need, and we're seeing much better aligned. The third is canine enrichment and the quality of life. So through structured enrichment and routine engagement, this helps reduce stress. We're seeing better behavior, better outcomes. This would include play groups that we have that they do every day, as well as different, like dogs have different food puzzles, different scents that they put on, listening to music. So there's a schedule, and Bo oversees that to make sure that all of the animals have enrichment and they're not just isolated in their kennels during their stay with us. So together, we're really doing a system-based approach to have better live outcomes in shorter lengths of stay. All right, our trap, neuter, vaccinate, release program. So there are some key components. The colonies need to be pre-registered. This allows us to track activity, ensure that everything's accountable. It also helps us manage city resources appropriately. A new change as well is residents trap, transport, and return feral cats to their colony. The city only costs the cost of the surgery and the microchip. This prevents the animals from ever coming into the shelter. That is really stressful for feral animals. And they're not getting exposed to disease, and we're ensuring they're being returned to the exact colony. It's also important to note we are only doing this for feral cats. If a cat is friendly or socialized, they're not eligible for this program. Instead, they are to be dropped off at the shelter, and we will get them adopted out. Microchips are registered to the colony caregivers. Rabies boosters are required, and let me see. Oh, and this is a relaunch of a 2023 program. We just, over the last year, our capacity was not where we didn't have the ability to keep it at the level that it is needed. There's a lot of feral cats in our community. Previously, they were dropping them off at the shelters, super stressful for the animals. We would get them spayed, neutered, and then the officers return them to the field. We saw issues with that even with the cyber incident, because where do those animals go if we don't have that intake information? In those cases, we worked with Brazoria SPCA, and they have a barn cat program. All right, so quarter 4, yes.
Interrupt, please. So for the programs that you've listed, if we have limitations on say this, on microchips, for instance,
Yes.
if we reach a point where there's a financial limitation, when you present these things to us, would it be appropriate to mention whether or not we are at that point so that those of us who want to donate or assist with costs of any program that is important to a person would know that there's an issue there or that there's an opportunity there to
Yes.
donate.
I could definitely do that. We've had a lot of medical cases, just in the last couple months. A lot of our donations go to those medical cases. I can at the next meeting, give you all an update of maybe some of those animals and how much money we have, because with the amount, it will run out. And we want to be able to, provide the best medical care without having to use them.
I think there's community support for some of those if people just know that it's needed.
I have a question about the TNR. Is any of that funded by grants?
Not currently. We had staff turnover in a position, intentional staff turnover, because stuff like that wasn't getting done. We
But there's an office with the city that applies for grants. So does it need to be an hourly person at the shelter that does it, or can the city office do that?
the way they function is we have to do all the research, get everything together, and then they will help file it and follow up with it. It's that beginning part, but I've reassigned that duty to a different position. So it's somebody who can really focus on that. Because previously, they had too many responsibilities and it wasn't important to them, so. All right, educational. We're really trying to get involved in the community and educating. This slide, it highlights those efforts. We partnered with several youth organizations, schools. We work with Girl Scouts, James Reese Career and Technical School, Lighthouse, Kempner, Clements, high schools, and Fort Bend Christian Academy. So what we're doing is engaging with the students early. We want to teach them about responsible pet care, as well as introduce them to public service careers and kind of what our jobs look like. Our fourth quarter community events, we participated in National Night Out, Public Safety Extravaganza, Sugarland 101, and the Fall Fest. We also have developed relationships this previous year that are ongoing outreach, to include Wagon Wednesdays, Petco adoption events, the farmers market, and then having our reoccurring microchip and vaccine events. So with these community events, we're really looking at building trust, increasing our visibility in the community, promoting adoptions, and teaching about responsible pet ownership so that we are reducing the calls because dog bites aren't happening. All right, so our last community vaccine event was in October. It was the second one we held last year. We saw a huge increase from the previous one in June. We provided 222 microchips. This was a 258% increase. We administered 232 distemper parvos, and then 132 FERCP vaccines. We also have a vaccine coming up this weekend, which we are currently monitoring the weather closely, and it will likely be rescheduled, but all of that will be out on our social media, and then we'll communicate with those who have signed up.
I think that there's in some of the advertisements for the event, I thought I saw the 25th and in some the 29th. So I think that I saw one that had the 29th, so maybe check and just make sure that we have the right dates.
I'll have the staff check on that. All right, so our highlights and challenges for last year. We had a lot of measurable progress. There was also a lot of constraints. On the progress side, we really focused on the fundamentals. Okay, we strengthened our regional collaboration, increased our adoption visibility, made operational improvements to including enrichment, the behavioral support, surgical capacity, expand our humane education. And we're working on modernizing our SOPs and the ordinances. These are structural improvements that will give us that long-term stability. At the same time, we did face many challenges. So these were not a result of inaction or mismanagement. It's just things that are often faced in a shelter setting, such as overcrowding, driven by our now open intake model, jurisdictional misuse, and regional capacity failures outside of our control. Stafford closed their animal shelter and we saw a huge uptick of animals showing up here with us. With also quarantine limitations. We had the cyber incident and TNR demands outpaced our existing infrastructure. That's why we had to remodel the program. We also have increased public scrutiny, misinformation, and that's really put an emphasis on, for me, transparency, education, and data integrity, and what those metrics look like, and we're about to take a look at them. So we're making a lot of progress. However, in this industry, there's always going to be issues. We're just trying to have an infrastructure that makes those issues easier to deal with and a lot more transparent. All right, you've probably seen this online. It's in our social media. It's just a high-level snapshot of 2025. On the shelter side, we managed to intake dogs, cats, and wildlife while still maintaining having an open intake facility while still having live outcomes. In the field, officers responded to more than 1,000 calls. Our prevention and community-based services, such as the pet pantry, the microchip vaccine clinics, our volunteers offered 5,294 hours, which is amazing. We couldn't do it without them. We also started a externship program for high school students interested in veterinary technology. And we had 284 hours with that program. We do expect it to go up this year because that program was started kind of mid-year, and we have a more structured program now. Okay, the numbers. Overall, we had a live release rate of 90.4. That is a typo, sorry about that. If you take a look at the graph on the left, that is our live release rate by species and then our average. You will notice April was an outlier. This aligns with kitten season when intake patterns shift and outcomes can be temporarily affected. Although we recognize it's seasonal, I think we need to take that opportunity to strengthen our cat program. Going forward, we're improving intake assessment to better distinguish healthy kittens from those needing medical care. They were getting the care, but it wasn't documented in the computer that they came in unhealthy. So it makes the outcome look questionable. So we need to be more transparent of the condition of the animals when they come in. Expanding our foster recruitment, having more bottle baby trainings, and strengthening public education to reduce unnecessary intakes of healthy kittens. Many times people will find a group of kittens, they're, fat, happy, clean, and they think that they're doing what's best for the cats by bringing them in because they didn't see mom. But oftentimes, mom is just out foraging, and those healthy kittens don't do well. Any kittens don't do well in a shelter environment. There's so much disease. And if they're bottle babies, we just can't give them the same attention that a mother does. So getting the education out there through our social media and working with our volunteers and fosters to increase those programs so that we are not seeing that dip again in our live outcomes in April. However, despite our higher demand, so if you take a look at the chart on the right, out of the last 3 years, in the blue, you'll see our total intake increased. This is due to our being open intake. And then our live release rate increased as well. So it's showing that our systems are stronger, our partnerships are more effective, and our prevention as strategies such as the pet pantry, we're seeing a lot of success and hopefully stability going forward. All right. There's been a lot of questions about bite dogs, why were decisions made? So I'm going to go through the rabies bite response. What does that look like? An animal bites. So this slide outlines how rabies bite cases are handled under Texas state law. It's important to note this is legal public health process. It's not discretionary. So when a bite occurs, the first thing that we need to do is have a medical evaluation to assess the injury. After that, we work to determine rabies exposure, the rabies exposure risk, which is based on state guidelines. It's not subjective or influenced by outside opinion. We're literally looking at legally what we're required to do. The third step is determining the animal status at the time of the incident, whether it was privately owned, shelter owned, a stray. If it was owned, was it vaccinated? When the bite happened, was the animal at large? Once those facts are established, the local rabies control authority, that is a person that the city appoints. For the city of Sugar Land, that is me. We make a decision based on that law, okay? The law requires, depending on the circumstances, quarantine or rabies testing. So these decisions are made based on Texas Health and Safety Code 826 and Administrative Code Section 169. These are in processes through the state, and we can't change them. It can't be at our discretion. So this process, the state law, is to protect the public from rabies. And as we know, the end of last year, there was a cat in Harris County that tested positive. So it's out there. Okay, so how do we at the shelter make those decisions? There's two parts, and they're often conflated. On the left, you will see dogs involved in bite incidents. So these cases will fall under public health and safety framework, governed by state law. Those are the cases we talked about at the previous slide. This is not at the shelter's discretion. It depends on how bad was the bite, where was it located, the rabies risk exposure, and then the local rabies control authority makes that decision. When rabies test is required, euthanasia is the only way. So they have to euthanize the animal to get the sample to send to the lab. On the other side, we have our dogs experiencing behavioral decline while they're in our care. So these are welfare-driven cases, dogs showing stress, and we first try to recognize that the animal's behavior is changing and support in place, such as different enrichments, reaching out for foster placements, or alternative, like working, training with them. Okay, only, how do I say this? With these animals, we would only consider euthanasia if it was in the animal's best interest to stop suffering. This is where we would use what everybody keeps calling the euthanasia policy. That is where we, have we reached out to different fosters? Do we have a behavioral evaluation? Have we tried that? We do that only with these animals, the ones that are experiencing behavioral decline, not bite dogs. Questions about that?
Oh.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to make a comment under shelter operations.
Oh, yes.
I think it's a huge improvement that people wouldn't know about otherwise, and as I was walking dogs early summer back by the kennels, Mark walks back, Mark, and notices the thermostat and looks at me and says, "The thermostat is set on 68, why is it 81 in here?" And so I explained that when the shelter was first built for the first several years, we had doggy doors. At some point, they were removed and never put back on. Now there are guillotine doors for when they clean and things like that, but there were no doggy doors. So technically, if it was hot or cold, that air was going in and out, and it was hot back there. The only way to alleviate the extreme temperatures was to close the guillotine doors, which meant the dogs had half of the space and no outside space where they usually, I think, feel freer to potty. And so whether Mark was more interested in the city funds for heating and air conditioning going out the door or animal welfare, maybe he cared about the dogs. I don't know. But he immediately went to work with Public Works, and I think within a month we had doggy doors.
The temperature went down like 20 degrees.
And I think it's a big plus, a big improvement, and nobody had done anything for years. And so I thank Mark for that.
Pointing that out. And he does like dogs. He sings to them. Sorry. Any other comments, questions? Okay, I'm gonna go over the dogs that we euthanized last year, go through each case. So this summarizes the 8 dogs. So in March, a dog was humanely euthanized due to injuries sustained when it was hit by a vehicle. In April, 2 dogs were euthanized. One was due to advanced age-related medical decline. The other was due to neurological distress requiring emergency intervention. It was seizing and they couldn't get it to stop. Both of these decisions, or all 3 of these decisions, those are made by a vet. That's not the staff. In June, 1 dog was euthanized following a serious bite incident involving a staff member. In July, 1 euthanasia followed a police assist, in which the police were having to intervene and having to help staff get that animal in the vehicle because it was so aggressive. In December, we did have 3 euthanasias. 2 involved a serious attack on a community member. And then the 3rd was an injury to a child. None of these were made for space, capacity, or convenience. Each decision was driven by medical suffering or serious public safety risk. Last year, we took in 267 dogs. We euthanized 8. So we had a 97% live release rate for dogs. There is some questions about 2. Silas. Yes, Silas did not show any aggression in the shelter. However, he attacked a small child in a face that required an ambulance hospitalization or in medical care. And you can't bring that dog back into the shelter and not guarantee it's not gonna happen again. The other one was Daisy. That was her second bite. And so Daisy was earlier in the year.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that there were
Okay, I'm just-
questions about the ones that were not euthanized. So it was Silas and Daisy. So Silas, we just talked about, that one was in December. Daisy, was not euthanized. It was her second bite. She had, one of the bites was a minor. She was a friendly dog. I did, so if we go back to this,
That's not the Daisy we have now.
No.
no, no, no.
Daisy that went to veg.
I went to veg.
The black, yeah, gotcha.
Okay, so that decision was made using this left-hand side, okay? Not behavioral decline. So I have to make it based on state law. Our shelter, we cannot quarantine animals. It's not built for that. The new shelter will be. It was her second bite. The only reason she was not euthanized, the vet called and said, you know, she is really friendly. I understand, you know, she needs to be euthanized. We can quarantine the dog here and we will take ownership of the dog. The vet was. That's the best case scenario for us. So we transferred the dog to them and the vet took that dog. Otherwise, we can't, I have to make the decision to euthanize. Okay, questions about either of those?
I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So in the incidences where it is police assisted, my concern on that is, and I don't want to open up this can of worms, but there has been an incident where police were mishandling a cat. And my concern is, do they have the training? If they're the first ones in, is it possible that the dog behavior is related to the fact that the police are not trained as well as an ASO to make that dog calmer? And my concern would be, would the decision to euthanize for behavior possibly was the behavior caused by the person who was first on the scene and how they handled the dog?
So the animal hadn't bitten. We kept the dog for 72 hours in case an owner came forward. It gave it that dog time to decompress, but it didn't get better. And they even struggled getting the dog to the vet. So we do take that in consideration.
On that specific case, the dog was in somebody else's garage and would not let the family get out of their car. And so that's why the police were called. So it was circumstances where it was kind of a no-win situation. So that is why the police were called. And then they recognized, okay, we have a fearful, aggressive dog in somebody else's property, in somebody else's garage, a family's at risk, the officers are at risk. So then they called an ASO for the very reason that you stated, because we're better trained. And then they were able to get the dog in the back of a police car. They couldn't even get it in the ASO truck. It was so aggressive. So they had to transport in the back of a police car. But that was the specifics on that one.
And since there wasn't a bite involved, we could wait that 72 hours to see if the dog would decompress, try to find the owners. It did not have a microchip. And that's when we made that decision, because it was still aggressive and posing a risk to staff and not an adoptable dog.
Thank
Any other question?
I have a question. Location of bite, that would be any child or any bite in the face, basically, right? Is kind of considered.
So the way rabies works is, so if a kid is bit in the face, it will.
Yeah, I need to interrupt. I'm sorry. Our meeting is not open to questions from the public except at the beginning.
Okay, the cyber event, there's a lot of confusion about our numbers and what impact it truly had. The primary impact was a temporary data loss or access to our data. So we temporarily lost access to our data. during the incident, all intakes and outcome activities were documented in real time. So, shelter operations continued. We moved over to pen and paper, and we had one person that was writing everything down for consistency. Once the system was restored, we had that single staff member enter all the information into our software program and then cross-checked against their original paper logs. The gap, it did not extend from when the incident happened. I don't remember the date. The data that we lost was from the backup. So say it happened on October 1st. We have all that information forward because we had it on paper and it was put into Chameleon. The data that we lost was from August 1st to the date of, September 30th, or whatever. That's the information that we lost. It didn't affect the way we run our numbers because thankfully our best friends reports are uploaded onto our website. So we could still have that historical data. So it doesn't affect broadly the numbers.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there a requirement of staff to train and be proficient on Chameleon? And who would it be that you would?
So
require that?
ideally, from where I'm coming from, everybody should be. However, because of the cyber incident, I'm looking at different software that is cloud-based. That way we never lose data again. That cloud-based software, every staff member will be trained on it.
And Chameleon uploads to 24 Pet Connect and Pet Finder. Is that scheduled? Is it automatic?
Automatic every night.
Once a day it uploads.
There's a steep learning curve for Chameleon. So with the turnover is definitely, I think, decreased, but with large hiring of new people, if they don't already know how to do it, it takes some time to learn it. It's very useful, and once you get it, but there is a very steep learning curve.
Unfortunately, they don't have cloud-based, so we're looking at other software. Okay, we're almost done. New animal services. We're still working on planning. We're working on a facility that we have priorities, such as we need a surgical center. Currently, we have officers driving animals into Houston and then picking them up and bringing them back. That's not good for the animals. It's very stressful. It affects healing and officer time. It takes them away from the field. So we're working on a design that has a surgical suite. And then we really want it to be a public centered facility. So intentional space for a classroom where we can hold classes for the community, have large adoption events, and then just encouraging positive engagement with us. So that's kind of our goal. This is the site. They have cleared it a little bit. It's right in front of the softball fields at Imperial Park. They had to do surveying, so they started to clear it a little bit. We do, the plan that we know is still breaking ground this summer. We haven't heard differently.
We have a schematic and a drawing of the outside, anything like that yet that I could use?
We're going back and forth on what it actually looks like, and just things changed from when the bond happened to, tariffs, everything. So we have to figure out what we can actually build for that amount of money. So it's still up in the air.
Okay. All right, I would just say as soon as possible.
Oh, yeah.
An exterior, it doesn't have, I can present it as potentially changing in the future, but something that you could show to donors.
Just a reminder, this board serves as an advisory board. We really want to encourage you to come into the shelter, even the public, come in the shelter, volunteer with us. Get to know and don't just read everything you see online and expect it to be accurate. Come in and see for yourself, work with us. We would be happy to have you, even if you just want a tour and get to meet the staff. One thing that we need from this board is we need to raise $2.4 million for the shelter. And we need a subcommittee that is willing to work with Legacy, the foundation that's helping raise the money, so that we have that partnership. You'll be the one kind of filling them in on progress and working with them. Do we have any members that would be interested?
We already had that.
No, but we have new
We have new
members.
members, so I would welcome anybody who wants to participate in fundraising.
And I think they're having monthly meetings, I think.
Every few weeks, yes. Maybe every two.
Barbara, you know, those of us have been on the board a long time. We've had the schematics, we've had the walkthroughs, we've had, yes, it's gonna be here by Chuck E. Cheese, and then we're gonna move it. And, you know, how can we, I work at James Avery, how can we sell if we don't know what we're selling? I mean, that's bottom line.
I absolutely get it. Get it.
We are advocating, as hard as we can to make sure that we get a shelter that we want.
That is good for the community.
That's good for the community, that's good for the animals, and so we're advocating, I'm trying to use appropriate terms, we're fighting as hard as we can to make sure we get the best bang for the buck as far as caring for the animals, and to make sure that there's no shortcuts taken, and to make sure that the new shelter is gonna supplement the improvements we've made at the current shelter with the play groups and the animal enrichment. And we want to make sure that we get as much exterior space for the dogs as we can. We want to make sure there's as much natural sunlight as we can. All these things cost money, so we're, the surgical suite is our number one priority, because it goes into the new TNVR program, is that when you're loading animals up at 7 o'clock in the morning and bouncing them all the way to Houston, and then you got to go pick them up and bounce them all the way back and in and out of the kennels. If our goal is someday to have our surgical suite at the new shelter, where we can have a vet come in, even if it's part-time, and do a lot of the routine surgeries there. So we don't have to put the animals on the trucks and bounce them around. So all these things cost money. So we're advocating as hard as we can to make sure we get a state-of-the-art shelter, because we know the community is expecting it. And so we want the schematics, we want the elevations as quick as you do, and we're pushing as hard as we can to get that. We just want to make sure before we put it out there, it is a true representation of what we're going to get. Because the last thing we want is to have a conceptualization put out there, and then the real building doesn't look like that. So as soon as we get it, we want you to have it.
But at the same time, there's a certain momentum before
Yes, ma'am.
before we break ground. And there are many different places that I have asking, do you have a drawing? Do you have just
Can we provide, is there any way for you guys to provide us, like, as the stages develop, like provide the fundraisers, like, this is what it looks like right now? Preliminary, thank you. Like, and knowing, cause I feel like even with the qualifier, like, hey, this is likely going to change and be tweaked, but here's because people like the big fancy photos. So I know you're doing this very hard dance, this balancing act of, we want the correct quality shelter, but we also have to expand quantity because of the pet overpopulation crisis. So I wonder if at any point when you do get drawings, like, I feel like we could still work with that. We could let the citizens know ourselves, like, hey, this is likely going to change, but this is what it looks like. This is what we want it to look like right now, so. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if that's even, you know.
I think we're getting close to that. Have a lot of meetings, and hopefully we'll have a good timeline and something to give.
Yeah.
Soon, I hope. And we've already bounced, we want the obviously the fundraising, we know we've got to capitalize on the excitement and the planning. And so I know we're working on, different ideas for small donors or big ticket donors, if there's things, you know, plaques or names, or if someone really wants to give a lot of money, we could name the surgical suite after them, or.
All of that is like in the weeds.
Yeah.
So all I'm asking right now is if there's any potential for, I know you want proper elevations and all the square footage, and sometimes when you put a building out there, if we're not careful, it does become the thing we buy. And I'm aware of all that, like we went through all this in 2016,
Yeah.
so we feel for you. But at the same time, I think there's a place for some kind of artistic rendering of a building that architects can, like, they're pretty familiar with that. And I worked on another project where we got it at the beginning, like before the design was even done. And it was just an artistic rendering and had people, you know, milling around the building. And that is how they began to sell. So again, I'm not asking, I understand the importance of the design features that you're working on. But as you go forward, if there's any possibility of just a rendering
We're very
that could
close.
be.
We're very close. I think we're very close.
Wanna have a soft
It's not that it's not like we haven't, we're not ready to give it to you. We're still discussing some basic structural things like, differences that we're having. So.
The way that it was originally drawn, it was more of like an animal warehouse. Let's have as many kennels as possible. But there's no function. There was no function.
Yeah, it was simply that
Inside, like.
yeah, it was just,
And so
walls were not the proper
that's
width.
what
Yeah,
companies were sold when they came on board, but that is not what Sugarland needs, and that's the problem. So we're going back and forth with them on that, to make it a functional shelter that is good for the animals in our care, as well as a resource center to the community.
and I don't even think like the interior, like you're talking about, the number of kennels, the amount of space per, that isn't the detail that I'm interested in at this point. That will become important as we get down and make those decisions that you talked about, for fundraising, but, or for donations. But for right now, if there's just an artistic rendering of like the front of a building that you could, enough, I won't keep harping on it.
And
but
a
just-
sign,
We hear you.
and a sign,
I get there too.
and a sign at the location that we are going to do it.
And we are definitely, we are 100% on
I
that
mean,
location.
I have,
Gonna change.
you know, we have been listening to, and I'm gonna use the term rhetoric. We've heard this before.
I'm
You know,
sure.
I mean, we have blueprints at home like 7, 8 years ago, you know? I mean, we cannot go to the people that we want to go to for money on what is said by staff. We need to have something tangible to show them. And including HOA meetings and whatever.
The reason we don't have renderings of the outside is we're still going back and forth with them on even square footage, like.
We don't care.
I know, but it affects, yeah, the look of the outside. Like, if we need all of these things, what is the square footage actually gonna be? Because the outside would differ completely.
We've had 2 bond issues that people trusted us. And they have seen nothing.
I
And
understand.
you represent those people. So we have a commitment to you to show us something that we can show the public.
Did we have a soft, like, deadline or?
It's not, it would be something we,
Rendering, like.
yeah, it's something I would need to talk to the architects. We have an upcoming meeting with, the local architects as well as the animal arts, the other architect we're working with. After that meeting, I should be able to, we'll give you an update to the board.
And Animal Arts is aware of the rendering thing, like that's something that we've talked about in the past. So they would definitely
done
understand
it.
what you're asking for.
Things have changed, prices have changed, so it really affects square footage. Okay. All right, next meeting, we're gonna have 5 meetings this year. We just had our first one. The next one will be February 18th, and then we'll have April 15th, July 15th, and October 21st. And now we need to work on our strategic plan. We're gonna do a 5-minute. No.
We're gonna do it for the next meeting.
Yeah, okay. You know what? We're just gonna do it on February 18th. So the goal are on February 18th, we'll work on going through the strategic plan. We have an outline that we worked with the city. Staff worked with an organization within the city, and we want y'all's input before it's finalized.
Oh, can I say one more thing on the new shelter design? We've actually looped, they've always been part of it, but we've brought the engineering department into more meetings to make sure that we're getting the best shelter we can get. But I hear you.
Couple questions. Just basic website stuff. A lot of times, like right now, there's a cat there, there's no picture. Hard to find your cat if you don't have a picture. And also, I don't know who updates the city's animal shelter website, but on the front page, there's a slideshow. And there's a fat black cat named Annie's who's been gone for a very long time. A brindle dog, I know I walked him 2 years ago. He's been gone. And Joel. So when we have someone update that,
We just hired a person into that position. They started on Saturday. So
the city just did.
our new community engagement person, they're gonna be, they have a learning curve, but they're running our social media, and then we'll work on our website.
And also, on the page that's, I think it says animal or adoption information. If you go through the pictures, there's a picture of Yenny with a dog, there's a picture of Kayla with a dog. And we put current volunteers.
Yes, that would be amazing. Yeah. We need to, I'll talk to you after and we can work on this. All right.
Okay, so are we doing it or no? No.
And y'all receive copies of it?
Okay, well then, if there are no other questions, we'll move on to adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
I second.
All those in favor?